today. We're really excited about this event. So, without further ado, this is a webinar event that's hosted by the ACEC Emerging Professionals Committee here. I am Tim Cargill. I'll be acting as our host and facilitator of the conversation today with our panelists here joining me. We have 4 panelists with us. Right away, you may be thinking, what exactly is a reverse webinar? That's a great question. Reverse webinar really began as an idea by the Emerging Professionals lead, Kevin Spitz. So the idea is taking the traditional panel style where you have, maybe 4 or 5 experienced industry professionals, maybe they've had 20, 30 years in the industry, and you have typically a younger audience that's tuning into this conversation to learn from people who've been in the industry a long time, essentially flipping that idea on its head and having more of a younger or a new professional committee here, maybe 15 to years less as our panelists. And then we have a more experienced audience, kind of doing a little bit of a role reversal here to learn about the other side of things. So like I said, we have 4 panelists here with us today. I will go over a quick intro of everyone before we get started here. But the purpose of this event, like I said, is just to get further insight on the young professionals here and to just have complete transparency from both sides. The topics we'll be discussing today are attracting, engaging, and retaining young professionals, work-life balance with work from home and working from the office, and then our last topic will be how your firm impacts your professional growth. So I will share my screen and we'll go over quick introductions here. So first up, I will be your host here. Tim Cargill. I work for Burns & McDonnell in our water global practice. I am a project civil engineer with a background in water, wastewater, and drinking water systems-based services, including projects like water and transmission main design, master planning studies, and design and construction management services. A fun fact about myself is I built a small footbridge, an 8-foot wooden footbridge over during my time in college. Next up, I have our panelists. Kick it off with Tyler Grau here. He is a transportation engineer working for Stanley Consultants. During his time with Stanley, Tyler has had project experience in all phases of the engineering process and is currently leading the traffic engineering team in the Chicago office. Most of his experience lies through preparing preliminary engineering studies and traffic signal design for IDOT, county, and municipal clients. Fun fact about Tyler here is he was kidnapped and then later rescued as a part of the Green Berets as a part of a domestic military training and association with Engineers Without Borders. Next up, we have Dana McCain. She is a senior structural engineer with Orion Engineers. Dana began her time in the industry. She first performed tasks ranging from steel connection design for an airplane hangar to barge stability analysis for shipping precast sections down a river. Among other projects, Dana has experience renovating historic buildings, serving as the on-site contract support, and designing new structures, including an addition to a hospital. Fun fact about Dana is her home has an entire closet devoted to board games, and she likes to host board game nights. Next panelist, we have Hannah Engel. She is an aviation engineer at Hanson's headquarters in Springfield, Illinois. Hannah is a civil design engineer. She performs design engineering duties on aviation projects. She joined Hanson in 2018 as an intern and became full-time in 2020. Fun fact about Hannah is she has 2 dogs, Rufus and Odin. And then last here we have Eamon Omadi. He works for Atlas Engineering as a structural engineer. During his time with Atlas, Eamon has worked on inspections and analysis of toll space frame structures throughout the IDOT tollway. He's assisted in designing and repairing them, doing TS&L creation and phase 2 design of a two-span IDOT bridge and performing bridge load calculations. Fun fact about Eamon is he has been struck by lightning. So this will be our panel here for today. We're very excited to get started. One quick housekeeping rule that we wanted to go over. For everyone to see all the panelists equally, there's a layout button actually in the upper right-hand corner there. You can change from a stacked or a side-by-side layout to a grid. That is our recommended method, so you can see each panelist equally, as we begin here today. And then lastly, we encourage everyone to use the chat here, ask any questions as we're going through. I'll do my best as the host to catch any questions and make sure we're incorporating them here. We have 10 minutes at the end. We're hoping to catch any last minute questions if we don't go through all of our time here through questions. With that, I will kick us off with our first topic here, which is attracting, engaging, and retaining young professionals here. So many companies in the industry are struggling to retain their employees while also trying to hire new employees because the labor market is so tight right now. Many managers are trying to figure out a way to retain their employees. I see almost daily on my LinkedIn, this company is looking to hire, that company is looking to hire, my company is looking to hire. So that brings us to our first real question for our panelists, which is, what are young employees looking for in an employer, and what is the best way to keep a young employee engaged?
I can start us off if no one else has something they want to say. So I think a big factor to retaining and kind of just engaging your employees is just allowing for flexibility. And, at the same time as you allow flexibility, you also have to kind of help and assist in pointing your young professionals in the best direction for their career. I think it really is a delicate balance between allowing for individuality and curiosity from younger professionals, along with, guiding them from more experienced senior staff. So I think that's a big thing is, kind of having your younger professionals feel like they are being individually cared for, because each young professional has their own, wants, needs, and experiences.
Yeah, and to add to that, I've been around for a little bit here, and fortunately didn't really have to kind of negotiate this part of joining companies where everybody was working full time. So where I kind of see it is, my concern would be bringing somebody in. Are you going to be supporting them enough while allowing that flexibility? Because I think flexibility is kind of going to become the expectation. But then at the same time, making sure you are providing that support. I would be worried, I guess, if I were coming in and, in a fully remote situation of how my career development would progress, and would I fall behind somebody that might be, in the office a little bit more. So I, and Eamon, maybe you can kind of speak to that in your experience, even between internships, because I know you were kind of mentioning how different those experiences were.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had an internship that was, in person before the pandemic hit, and then that was remote when the pandemic was here. And it seems like the way the interactions you have in person are just much more organic, and they allow for more, side chats, and it allows more room for different types of advice that aren't just strictly based on work and on a project that you're working on specifically. But I definitely think flexibility and being able to tailor an experience to an individual based on their situations in many different facets.
So So I think that the best way for employers to attract younger employees is to catch them fresh out of school with an internship. And because I know that is what worked for me. I have only worked at Hanson exclusively, started after my sophomore year at Bradley, and I've stayed ever since. And so I think um, being open to bringing in interns and teaching them from the ground up is a good way to retain young employees. And I think that the best way to keep younger employees engaged is to check in on them. It doesn't have to be on a daily basis, but at least on a weekly basis and see if they need help with anything and if everything's going well.
Yeah, Hannah, I think you bring up an excellent point about internships. I know where I went for undergrad, there wasn't a huge draw into the design field. A lot of people had, internships in construction management and stuff as well. And as a structural engineer, I didn't really know how to find those internships. So sometimes it's finding those schools that maybe aren't getting pulled into your specific field, and maybe that's an easier way for you to find an intern. And yeah, I agree that that would be a great way to find someone and keep them on, get them a taste of the industry.
Yeah, and that's also a great way to keep having new grads every year because the first company I worked for had that was what they did. They every year they brought in new grads, a group of new grads, and that always kept you could build really good relationships with them. And as you kind of progress through your career, you kind of have that strong relationship, which is important. It kind of builds loyalty to the company. And if you switch companies and you lose that, I mean, it's really hard to have that same same feeling with that other company long term until you can really develop that bond. So I think just having a younger workforce too would help with that.
Yeah, so it seems like, catching people fresh out of school is definitely a great, approach, and considering flexibility and all that for new hires coming on board. I guess the next question that brings me to is what would be the ideal, work culture in a company to kind of attract you or retain you to a firm?
Yeah, so I can go ahead and talk a little bit about this. So like in my mind, I think the ideal culture would be sort of like a community, both in the office and virtually that, of employees and coworkers who are able to support you and help you, um, you know, help you as a, you know, a fellow person in your career, not necessarily as someone who you just have to work with on a project. And I think also promoting a culture that allows people to bring their authentic self to work and aren't trying to fit people into, one, um, project or task or anything like that. And I think also having coworkers who want to like build a true team relationship and like having people who are also just as motivated and interested as you are definitely helps with the culture.
I agree. My ideal company culture is one where there's a really good work relationship with your coworkers, where you're able to joke around occasionally, but also still be able to get your work done and just having empathy for one another.
Great. Yeah, that's all great stuff. So the next question that kind of brings me to is, when trying to choose an employer, um, what are the top three things that may attract you to accepting a job? Different, including different things like salary, benefits, the type of work, the actual project work that you're doing, the core values of the company, work schedule, flexibility, keeping all those in mind. What would be the top three aspects that would attract you to a new company?
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So I kind of group salary and benefits together because really they are, kind of one package at the end of the day. So I would say that would be, the primary thing. Benefits ranging from insurance, PTO, family leave, those things all matter in deciding, where I think anybody would want to go, but I know, where I would, look. And then, type of work would probably be the next thing for me. You know, I I like a variety. I wouldn't want to be designing the same columns over and over again. I think that would get tiring. There's a reason I'm a structural engineer. I like what I do. So, the variety of projects is high on my list. And then something that I wouldn't have considered before, but something that is on the forefront of my mind now is flexibility. I've been able to mostly work from home throughout most of the pandemic and whatever you want to call this phase now, post pandemic, still in the pandemic. But the idea before that our industry couldn't function if people were working from home, at least from the design side of things, I think has been proven false by the fact that all of these projects have kept going over these past few years. And there's obviously pluses and minuses to being in and out of the office, but having the flexibility to work with an employer to kind of establish what is the best options for the entire team would be important.
Yeah, with Dana, with what you said, those are the first two items I think are probably going to be priorities for most people. Something that I would throw in there too is, and I guess it's kind of related to core values of the company, but the way companies kind of operate and run can vary significantly from size of the company, whether it's a smaller 20-person size compared to 5,000 person firm. And that's something that I would think would be important because in each of those scenarios, decisions are made differently. There's different opportunities. So, I'm looking at opportunities and where can your career growth go? And you could be more limited in a 5,000 person firm rather than a 20-person firm, depending on how the companies are run and what their goals are. So, that's something that I value in understanding what's our strategic growth, where's the company going, how do we want to get there, and allowing the younger professionals to understand that helps them get a vision too. In addition to they can kind of then see themselves in 5 years or 3 years, how they might fit with the group. And if they feel like their role is limited, then certainly that might be a reason somebody would look elsewhere.
I think another thing to touch on with young professionals, what we look for, there's a new benefit out there. It's a student loan assistance because the increase in student loans has increased a lot over time and not proportionally to income. So that is something that I know some employers are looking at and potentially weighing as like an option. But I know that would be a huge incentive for young professionals if there's a similar to how companies contribute to retirement in a 401k, they could contribute a percentage towards your student loans.
Yeah, Hannah, I think that's a really excellent point. Tyler, to kind of go off of what you said, one of the other topics that we've had kind of discussed in the practice was, what would keep you at a company, and the thing that you mentioned about potential for growth, that's, top of my list, I would say. Sometimes it's hard to know what the potential is before you join a company, which is why I didn't, mention it in like this list of what would, make you interested in a company. But for me, once you're at a company long enough, it's very obvious if, there's room for you to start moving up, if there's a place that you fit within the company. And some of it does have to do with is it a 5,000 person firm? Is it a 10-person firm? You know, it's the company's potential for growth as well as your potential to move up within the company. And if you feel like you're progressing at the right rate, I think that's super important. And again, is something that's like evident when you're within the company itself, where sometimes it's a little bit less clear as you're like looking to join.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think that like kind of ties back to just companies providing like an individual experience and kind of actually caring about what each like young professional wants in their career, and also what they think, would lead them to their goals and stuff like that. And I think that's what a lot of, young professionals seek and want. And I also think that, small or big firms, you can definitely be able to provide that. And I think, if you make that evident, I think young professionals would be very like, loyal and would, love to work at your firm.
Yeah, I think that's a question a lot of time that people think about is where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? And if firm can really foster that and grow that with each person, that goes a long way in retention. And following up on that every year or two to see how people are progressing, and just giving the care and attention that young professionals need, through those early development years is definitely very important. So um, great conversation there. But we did talk a little bit about flexibility here in the last section. So that's a little bit of a segue onto our next topic here, which is really the work-life balance, working from the office versus working from home. The engineering industry hadn't really seen anything like this before. The COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people were forced into these work from home programs, and it was never really a thing before then. It's been almost 2 years since the World Health Organization declared the pandemic, and a lot of engineering companies have, adopted a hybrid or some sort of work from home policy program. But really, the pandemic has changed, where we work, how we work, and when we really work. But what we'd like to think about in this section is how does that affect, maybe management's role or the impact on that younger staff who maybe they're in their first 2 years and they've never been consistently in the office, before then. So we'll just kick it off with our first question here is, has the work from home, thus far through the pandemic, has that made it, easier, harder, the same in connecting with, coworkers or your supervisors thus far?
I can start off. I would say there's in some ways it makes it easier, where you can maybe catch somebody that is often either out of the office to begin with. If your supervisor is on the road a lot or something, might actually make it easier to catch them. With more flexible hours, it can be easier to get things done. And there's other people that you see online at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and you can connect with them then that way. But Eamon, you mentioned earlier in the beginning those organic conversations that aren't taking place. I think that's the biggest thing that I see that we're losing, working remote. And so that that's probably the thing I see the most that is challenging is continuing those relationships if you're in a purely remote situation. And I know people have done things to try to develop that with just hosting a Teams call just while they're working and just chatting up. And I think that's a great idea. That's something I haven't experienced yet, and maybe something that would help that situation. But I would say overall, in general, in my experience, it has made it a little more difficult, even though there are some of those other benefits.
Yeah, and I think there's ways to, be able to foster some of those, natural conversations. Obviously, it's not going to be the same as, being in an office together and overhearing someone else talking on a project, unless, like you said, Tyler, you just set up a Teams call while everyone is working and, people can just kind of chime in and you can overhear those conversations. but also, some things that we've done are, set up some virtual lunches or, happy hours. And just hearing about other people, I found out that a younger engineer, um, actually a younger construction manager, has experience in Revit. When I was in school, we didn't learn Revit in school, but it's become obvious to me that that's something that's taught now. So, learning that and this not being a person that I work with regularly was very helpful. Maybe I would have learned that sooner had we been in person. But with this person being in construction management and them often being in the field, maybe I still wouldn't have learned that if it wasn't for, some of these virtual interactions. And, she was at a slower part on one of her projects. I was able to bring her in and have her help with, Revit on, a busier part of one of mine. And, that was a really wonderful trade-off that came from a virtual call while working from home.
Yeah, so a lot of companies too are doing work share, and we've been doing work share for a while, but now I think it's even more easy to engage with people from other offices. So I have found that relationships have developed if you have a larger company that has multiple offices. It is much easier, and now you have the screen share. You can jump on a call with them and build relationships. So I guess from an overall networking standpoint, I think it's made it easier. From the internal office side, I think it has made it more difficult in that sense, though. So more trade-offs.
So touching on new hires that may be just joining, the workforce, and there's some work from home, there's some in the office. Have you guys found any successful ways to integrate kind of those new hires into, the culture of the company through that virtual or work from home program?
Yeah, I think similarly, kind of having some of those less structured calls is helpful. Sometimes the trick is getting those people to join. When you're a new hire and you maybe don't know somebody or feel comfortable or don't know if this is something you should be attending, that's even the same as my experience when I was a young engineer in person. So figuring out how to get those young professionals to join those kind of more social events that are happening virtually is one challenge. But I feel like if somebody can, strike up a friendship with them, either through like mentoring or being a peer or something like that, and then kind of say, hey, come along to this, virtual event. I think that that's a way to kind of bring people into that side of the company culture. Um, there's, obvious challenges, still with that. But I think that that's one way.
I also think that the most important thing to keep in mind when working from home is to try to stay on a similar schedule as your coworkers and supervisors, because it is nice to have the flexibility to work hours, but if you're working completely different hours, it's really hard to communicate and um, get things done those ways. So I think it should be everyone's goal working from home to try to, I mean, an hour or two here or there is fine, but at least trying to stick together to a schedule that works, and being open at keeping that communication line open is key to a successful work from home culture, in my opinion.
Yeah, Hannah, I agree. And I think sharing too, like when you are going to be out or away, like if your hours are a little bit different than normal, kind of giving, the rest of your team a heads up, is a useful tool too. So that way, especially as a younger person in the profession, you're not thinking that someone is ignoring you or, something like that, because you can't see them, you can't interact with them. So, kind of having that information is helpful. Sharing calendars too.
Yeah, and like even um, meetings with your team, and those are things that we always talk about. Is when are people going to be out of the office? When are people going to be working remote? And um, because it isn't just always your schedule. If you have somebody that's helping you on a project and you're mentoring them, then you really need to consider what their needs are too.
Yeah, it sounds like we're looking for maybe management to be a little more transparent on a lot of these things concerning work from home and just being very conscious of their team, being that you're not seeing them every day. With that, is there anything else that maybe you could think of that management could do differently to help, promote this work from home environment?
So one thing I would say is maybe it's not do anything differently, but the remote situation, these flexible situations isn't going to work for everyone. And there's going to be people that want to be in the office full time. There might be people that desire to be remote full time, and understanding and you're not going to have a one size fits all solution. And I think most people recognize that and understand that. But trying to be as accommodating as possible is important, and even understanding what the employees' desires are, and not trying to push one direction maybe because it's their personal preferred approach, but rather just being collaborative with the teams to understand, trying to find a solution that, can accommodate everyone as best possible.
Yeah,
Um,
and oh, sorry,
and I was
Tyler.
just going to say, it's not always clear, I think, to the staff that how decisions are being made. And
Mhm.
so, to what you're saying, Tim, about transparency and understanding and explaining how decisions are made and why they're made, I think goes a long way.
Yeah, and I was just going to say as well, understanding that desires and needs change as well for flexibility. When we were kind of all initially talking a week or so ago, Tyler, you mentioned, where do I think I'll be working in 10 years, in terms of do I think I'll be in the office full time? Do I think I'll be home full time? Or do I think it'll be somewhere in between? It's hard to know what I would want in 10 years, right? Circumstances change. What I want now might not be what I want in 5 years, 2 years, so being able to have that open dialogue with an employer, making sure that everybody's needs are being met. It's obviously not just, an individual, everyone is part of a team and a company. But to make sure that, there's an understanding and an open communication, to talk about what people want.
Yeah, definitely. And I think along with that flexibility, I think it also helps to have some sort of, some sort of direction and some sort of schedule, not like a rigid schedule, but a schedule that people can kind of use as a guide, because I think it does help from, from a new engineer perspective. I think it helps when I'm in the office. It helps a lot when also, the people who are mentoring you, who are on the projects, more experienced people are also there to kind of guide you along the way because, when you are in the office, you want to be interacting with people. And then when, if people want to work remotely, they can work remotely. But I think it definitely helps, to have some sort of direction and not just be, kind of everyone for themselves. I think that also promotes kind of more of a team environment as well.
Definitely. And just circling back on we got a question in here, just asking what kind of social events or outings / get-togethers would you guys recommend to kind of promote that bond, between young professionals and between young professionals and management?
I can speak to a couple of virtual ideas, I guess. We've done some trivia challenges and that's been kind of fun and a way to have some fun competition amongst people in the staff, but it's also like lighthearted. Um, obviously, grabbing lunch or grabbing a dinner in person or something is always nice too, depending on people's comfort levels, and, ability to do that at the time. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah, I really enjoyed when like when coworkers kind of do some team activities together, such as doing like intramurals, sports, or something like that. I think those they truly kind of bring people together in a team that's, you know, completely unrelated to engineering, but still relies on many of the same, you know, attributes of communication, of all these things. And I think that really, you know, it also puts it with, you know, having fun and just like getting closer to your peers and stuff like that. So I think those are like some of my favorite kind of events that bring teams together and kind of get you closer with your coworkers, on a not like, you know, not as professional basis.
So some things that I thought we did really well, and this was pre-pandemic. We just kind of gauged the younger members on ideas. So we got a list of ideas, and then we just kind of went down the list. So the first thing we did was bowling, which is usually pretty easy, and we had a decent, okay turnout. And then the next thing we did was a tactical laser tag event, and it got every single person like out from the office, which I was surprised how many people went. So um, I would, you know, you never know what's really gonna get people excited to come out, but you know, those are two things that it wasn't like going to a bar for a happy hour. Although we did do that afterwards, and that was well attended as well. But you know, making the variety, I think, and having something that is interesting. The Jackbox games, I haven't tried them in a work setting, but just from like friends and family, those have always been fun, and those are pretty easy to get set up too.
Yeah, we've done those in a work setting, and I think those went really well. We've also over the summer we did an outing to a White Sox game. That was really fun, and that's something that, you know, everybody from, you know, entry level to most senior level can, you know, go together and enjoy. Another thing that I've done at a previous company was go to a cooking class all together during the day. And that was really enjoyable, you know, pretty easy to as a group, even if you're not, you know, all at the same level of cooking and stuff. Is enjoyable. And then you get to sit down and eat a meal together. One thing that I would recommend as well for, you know, more senior people at a company, I know as someone, you know, who has been like younger at a company before, sometimes it's hard to strike up those conversations with people more senior. It can feel a little bit more intimidating, especially at a larger company where maybe you're not interacting with these senior people on a daily basis. So if the senior people, you know, maybe make a slight effort to, you know, say hi or something at one of these events and exchange, you know, a quick story or something like that, that could also help foster, you know, a communicative environment.
Yeah, that's a great point because I remember starting out, and if I knew that there was a vice president or a group manager, there were going to be people in leadership there. You could tell more people wanted to go also. So I think if you show up, then they'll show up too.
Yeah, those are all great ideas, and mix it up from the typical, you know, happy hour, going to grab a drink, you know, getting a variety in there, and you know, really gauging your audience within your company, because you know people will want different things. So yeah, no, great, all great ideas. Encourage all those activities. So
Probably escape rooms are probably overdone at this point, I would say.
right.
Still
On the
really
virtual,
fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but that'll bring us to our last topic here. We'll talk about and catch any questions that we've been receiving. But how your firm impacts kind of your professional growth, you know, moving into your careers being so young. So, you know, actively pursuing, you know, professional development, you know, keeps your skills and your knowledge up to par with industry standards. You know, going to things like conferences and things like that can you know, obviously, you know, sharpen the skills of the staff and make people more comfortable, you know, in their industry overall. So the first question to the panel here is how can manager actively support, you know, an individual's growth and development early in their career?
So I can kind of start off because you know, I've kind of just started out recently, and some of the things that really stood out to me that I, you know, really enjoy is when managers kind of keep you in the loop on, you know, societies and extracurricular things that are you know outside of your projects and your company. I think keeping you in the loop on, you know, stuff they're involved in, you're directly under them. So a lot of the things that they're involved in and they kind of know about and you know, feel comfortable in are also, you know, going to be helpful for you. So I think kind of helping point in the right direction, from like managers pointing their younger professionals in the right direction, whether that's, you know, providing, you know, contacts or emails or, you know, different societies and places to sign up for, to get involved. Because I think being involved in societies and other people from other companies, and throughout the industry is very important, in professional growth. I think as we all know, since all of us panelists have reached out and, you know, wanted to get involved in these webinars.
Yeah, I think a really important topic is just advocating for people. You know, I ended up on this panel because one of my coworkers, I think threw out my name and, so being able to advance my career because of somebody, looking out for me, whether it be something like this or, somebody saying, hey, it would be really great if you took this webinar so you could learn, more about seismic design or something like that, and advocating for younger staff in places where they can't be, right? Like in discussions on, promotions and advancement, just having somebody out there that can advocate for you and talk to your strengths and make sure that, your talent is being recognized, is very important as a young engineer.
Yeah,
I
so go ahead, Hannah. You're good.
oh, I'm sorry.
No worries.
Well, I know at my company, and I think most companies, you have that annual meeting at the end of the year or at the beginning of the year, and I think that's a good time and opportunity to talk about like your professional goals that you have, and that's a good opportunity for your manager to suggest ideas that they have if you're having trouble coming up with your own goals. Um, so yeah.
I was actually going to say the same thing, so that's fun. Um, so to add on to that, I think the big thing was that that's the first step, and then the next step is following throughout the year. Because once you're on the same team, it's kind of the looking out for your younger staff, thinking about like, oh, if they were interested in, like you said, seismic design. I saw this come across my email. Like, make sure you get that information out to them because they may not be plugged into a lot of those email lists that the managers are getting. And a lot of those, there's some really great education stuff on the different professional societies. So I think it's good to have also diversity in which organizations you participate in, because that then gets you the largest reach of opportunities. If you have everybody in ASCE, then you're missing out on a number of other organizations that are providing benefits that your staff might be more interested in. If they're a water wastewater person and nobody's in AWWA or APWA, you're losing out on all those opportunities. So I think just having that diversity and with the organizations is important, and that helps you get that information out and provides more opportunities.
Definitely. And the last question, we've kind of covered professional organization and really pushing younger staff into that. That can be a great way to get people into leadership positions and get used to, performing some of those roles. But has there been anything else your firm has done, effectively to cultivate yourself as a leader through the initial part of your career?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm 8 years into my career. So it maybe what works for somebody at my level is slightly different, but encouraging me to do business development, really explaining what business development is, and a lot of the times it's something that young engineers can do too, right? In their first few years, maintaining ties with people that they know in the industry, going to these professional organizations and getting to know more people. Kind of showing the importance of some of that side of things, because that's not something we learn in school. The people in our field, that's usually not something on, your university curriculum. Also encouraging at the appropriate times for people to manage and take on more responsibility, dealing directly with the client, and not always having to be the go-between for certain, topics on projects. It can be really helpful and be a big source of confidence that lets you, carry that confidence through the rest of your career.
Yeah, and I think another really important thing for young professionals is that a lot of times young professionals will want to be part of things, but they may not, be comfortable going to things, because as everyone I think knows is, our civil engineering industry is very tight knit, and a lot of people know each other. But when you're entering in, fresh from college, or even like 10 years of experience, something like that, you may not be you may not know other people in the organizations that you would like to join. So I think it really helps. One of the things that I thought would really help me is when, you know, um, someone who's a part of an organization, kind of takes you under their wings and almost invites you to come with them. I think that really helps. Not just telling someone to go to something, but also like going a step further and almost, um, you know, helping them go through it. I think that takes the initial barrier out of it, where there's the nerves about going there and not knowing anyone or not having anyone to talk to. I think that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and I mean, just speaking on this specific webinar is, I mean, these are 5 people that I now know. When I see them somewhere, I'll be more comfortable to say hi to them and connect with them, whereas not doing even opportunities like this. So that's just one example, and then you expanded on all these other events that are going on. And I mean, I think that most people that are in senior leadership, there's professional organizations played a big part of that in getting them and expanding their networks. And that's something that I wasn't focused on early enough, and something that wasn't really pushed. And I think that, for me now, like having younger engineers in the office, I'm always trying to, encourage them and send them emails and, hey, there's this webinar, there's this conference, this kind of thing. And I think that would be appreciative, if I was starting out.
Yeah, when I'm talking to younger engineers, I often use the analogy of, most people can kind of relate to the feeling of not realizing how valuable it is to go to office hours in college until later at your time in college. So it's kind of similar. You don't realize how valuable it is to get involved in, professional organizations until, it's been a few years in your career, and the sooner you can learn that, the better. Same with, the sooner you can realize going to office hours will really benefit you in college.
So, all great, great stuff. And so I think that rounds out kind of our core questions here. We have about, maybe another 8 or so minutes. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that we've gotten coming in so far. So one of the questions in here is still very curious if there are specific benefits, kind of circling back to our earlier conversation about benefits, specific benefits that stand out to the panelists as either being the bare minimum requirement or kind of a big perk draw to get new employees.
One thing that has been highlighted more recently, and I know more companies are doing it, is the benefit to the parents, at least providing some time off for new parents. And I know a lot of companies in our industry maybe don't provide anything. So you're relying on using PTO and then supplementing that with some, short-term disability insurance, which I think is something that's very stressful in an already stressful situation. And, as you get into your career and you start getting into the time frame of thinking about those things, I think that stands out as a company that is kind of, they're not waiting for every other firm to do it. And then, okay, I guess we have to offer it. So I think that's something that you're seeing now and something that people really do value.
Yeah, and it's not just maternity leave, right? It's for fathers, it's for adoptive parents. And maybe for young engineers this is less pressing, but to be able to take care of elderly parents as well. There's a lot that can kind of be accomplished in, a good family leave policy. And yeah, I mean, with the way that, a lot of households are, two working parents now, that's really important to take into account. Another item that I know I personally look for, I am someone who really likes to travel, having a good amount of PTO to be able to accomplish that, and also having friends scattered around the country. I have 10 weddings to go to this year, and a lot of them are not local to Chicago, and trying to figure out, how do I best see, these important people in my life through other important events, but also not feeling like I'm putting myself in a situation where if I get sick later in the year that I don't have anything to use during that time. So it's walking those fine lines and having some flexibility there, some known flexibility, or some extra PTO or sick time separate from that is beneficial.
I agree. I think bare minimum benefits that a lot of us look for are a good PTO and sick leave and family leave. But if you really want to attract a lot of younger professionals, the one that I mentioned earlier about the student loan assistance, but an actual one that I was looking at was called Benefit Ed. And they do not only just student loan assistance, but also you could contribute to their or your employees' children's 529 plans. So even if your tuition is already paid off, the company could also help you pay for your children's. And so those are just ones that aren't super common right now, but they would attract a lot of younger professionals, I think. So.
And I've seen something with the student loan where it's where you pay off your student loan and instead of 401k matching, they're matching your payment. I think I've seen that program before.
Yeah, where you could choose one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great option to consider. And one of the questions we got, and maybe we don't know this answer off the top of our heads, or it's something that's case by case scenario, but what is a good amount to offer employees to help with student loans, or if there's other things that they should consider. I think that 401k match is a great option to maybe flex into those payments for younger staff.
Yeah, I would think if you have, 401k matching plans are kind of all over the place, but I think most commonly maybe you're seeing like 3 to 6% is something that I think if you're going over that, then that's, you're really gonna find somebody that's gonna see that and it's gonna stand out. But I would think that's kind of a standard, in that 4 to 6 even range.
We have time for one more question here. Kind of switching gears to going back to those internships and trying to get employees early. When searching for an internship, did the panelists use Handshake or career services through their college, university, or other platform? And what made one internship, maybe more appealing than another internship?
I've
I
been out
can,
of school. Oh, sorry, Hannah. Go ahead.
oh, okay, I'm sorry. I was going to say that what attracted me to Hanson is they offered their internships a scholarship opportunity, not to all the interns, but you would each year they kind of changed it up a little bit. One year you had to submit a paper about some work that you did, or there was a topic that everyone had to answer, or there was a presentation at the end of the internship, and then someone won that $1,000 scholarship. And I know that really attracted me as an intern, because especially if a company hires on quite a few interns and then paying one $1,000 scholar, even though it's not guaranteed you'd get it, it still makes you more attracted to that company because of the opportunity. So
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I've obviously been out of school for a little bit longer. But the way that I found internships was mostly by going to the career fairs at my school. So having a presence at a career fair, and not necessarily just sending HR, sending somebody that can kind of talk to potentially what you'd be working on over the summer, or talk about actual, engineering skills, and maybe relate to, oh, you have this class on your resume, I learned this in this class that is helpful for my career right now, or, something like that, is really beneficial. Even sending some younger engineers to those career fairs at your company to help attract those interns, or new hires, is beneficial.
Yeah, I think the ability of the people going to career fairs to connect with the people that they're talking to is like probably one of the biggest factors, from when I did career fairs. I think when you're able to have a conversation, that kind of just isn't forced and isn't something that's like an interview, right at that step. I think that's what really kind of makes you feel like excited and wanting to take the further steps and actually have an interview.
So with that, it looks like we got, maybe 2 minutes here left. So I just want to take a little bit of time to thank, our panelists here for taking time out of their schedule to participate in the event like this. This is extra time out of their days, so we definitely appreciate that. And then also thanking our attendees for joining us today. We'll get out of here right on time. We appreciate everyone's time for logging on. Before we take off today, we wanted to share one thing. We're just looking to, this panel is going to reconvene as a group and determine a survey questionnaire to distribute out to all of the ACEC leads. This will be a survey that's more directed towards the YPs in your office, with similar questions as we were asking today, just to gauge the community and get more of a quantitative result of all the employees and the workforce out there. So this committee will be reconvening on that and hopefully get that survey out to everyone in the next month to month and a half. And then 2 weeks following that, we'll hope to get all the results in. We expect, committee leads to just push that out to all the YPs in their organization, the emerging professionals. And then our overall deliverable will just be, kind of the results of that and sharing everything with the communities and, everyone who joined on this call as well. So with that, that is our panel today, and looks like we'll get out of here right now. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.